Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Marianne Shiozawa, and this is the You're Doing Great Mom podcast. I had the pleasure of speaking to a new friend and wonderful colleague of mine, Melissa Sandford. She is a super mom. She has 6 beautiful, healthy children from the ages of 23 and 5, and she has so many pearls of wisdom about motherhood and birth, babies, breastfeeding, and life in general, making it work, doing what she loves and what makes her happy, and living a full life. You'll hear her amazing birth stories of each of her babies, and I was so inspired by what she shared. And although we only met recently at a chiropractic seminar, I felt that during this conversation, I connected with her on so many levels. She's not a chiropractor, but her first husband is a chiropractor, and her current husband is also a chiropractor. She's been involved with the chiropractic profession for over 25 years and has been working with the United Chiropractic Association in the UK as a big voice for the organization, as well as the planning and putting together all the seminars hosted by the UCA. She currently lives in Spain with her chiropractor husband and 4 out of her 6 children. I really loved listening to everything she had to say, and I hope you enjoy this episode too. This episode was brought to you by the Mother Box. Thinking back when I was pregnant with my first child, if I got a lovely box filled with the essentials for my pregnancy, and then one for my birth, then another one later on after the birth, and finally one to keep me going through those first few months of my baby's life, that would have helped me enormously. Well, there's actually this amazing company based in the UK called the Mother Box, and these 2 women who I recently met, and they're fantastic. They had this brilliant idea and created these boxes, kits for the mom-to-be and for mothers to support them and hold them into and during their journey towards motherhood. This episode is sponsored by this fabulous company, and all mothers deserve all of the boxes. To find out more, go to themotherbox.co.uk, check out their beautiful website, and for a 5% discount, just send them an email and quote YDGM to receive your discount.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm really excited to talk to you because I didn't know you have 6 kids.
I know. Crazy, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, how would I know? How would I know, actually?
Yeah.
So thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
No, it's my pleasure. It's exciting to have, podcasts out there for women, I think, just doing their everyday lives. I think it's really important for, women to be able to hear what's going on for other people, because it's not always rosy like it is on Facebook,
Yeah, or fake book.
Yeah, fake book, exactly.
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, yeah, we do hear some sad stories every now and then, but yeah, I know what you mean. So are you Australian?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because I can now decipher the different accents.
So I'm lived in Australia until 1997. I moved to England in 97, and then I moved to Spain in 2015. So I've spent most of my adult life in England.
Yeah. Okay. And then did you meet your why did you move to England?
So my first husband is English,
okay,
and he was from Plymouth in Devon, where I lived for 18 years, and he's also a chiropractor. And I met him in Australia. We were actually both travelling. I was a school teacher at the time, and I was on my summer holiday, and he was on a break from university. He was in his final year, I think, at RMIT in Melbourne, Australia. And that's when we met, and then we hooked up like a year later in England, and when I was travelling again in Europe, and then we got married and had 2 kids in Australia. He did his PhD over there. Then
wow.
he wanted to come home because his father was a chiropractor, so they have a family practice.
Mm-hmm.
And his father had a really bad accident when he was 15, and so his mother kept the practice for the children, and all of them did become chiropractors, and sort of one by one they sort of came back and worked in the practice. So, and he's still there in the family practice. In fact, he owns it now; it's his practice, and so yeah. So, but yeah. So cool. There you go. That's how I ended up here. So we came for a couple of years and stayed for 18. So
yeah, that's usually how it works out, right?
Exactly. And yeah. Look, I really love it here. I love Australia, but I do really love the life I've built for myself here. So
yeah, that's good. And you're living it's probably because you're living this full life. Chiropractic sounds like it's a really big part of your philosophy and lifestyle. So it doesn't surprise me. You make it the way you create it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how old are those kids?
So my eldest daughter is I have to get this right now. Isn't this terrible? She'll be 23 in July.
Oh, wow.
And she's actually in Australia in her 3rd year of chiropractic school.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so that's exciting. And yeah. She's living in Melbourne and working in a couple of different chiropractic offices. And she's a really strict vigilante vegan, I call her. She's
is
really,
she?
Yeah, really into veganism and yoga and chiropractic and all sorts of things. So yeah, she's over there doing her thing, and we really miss her, but it's the right thing for her to be there. And then my next eldest is 20. Mm-hmm. He'll be 21 in November. He's living in England right now, and he's going to chiropractic school in Australia next year.
Cool.
And then my 3rd child from my first marriage, he's about to turn 18 in 2 weeks' time.
Mm-hmm. And so tell me about your kids. So you had your first 2 with your first husband.
No, my first 3. So 20.
3. Okay.
So they're currently 22, 20, and 17.
Okay.
It's probably should stick with their current age. I always think about what it's going to be in a week or 2,
Yeah, I know. I think we all do that.
Yeah. And then we separated, and I remarried my husband now, who's also a chiropractor, and I met him in England, and with him I have Noah, who is 10, mm-hmm. Poppy is 7, and Ava is going to be 5 next week.
So I met Poppy and
Ava.
Okay.
And Noah was there too, but he's very quiet, so you wouldn't notice him so much.
The 3 of them were there. Okay, yeah. Now I remember.
Yeah.
And I think I adjusted.
Poppy, maybe.
Yeah, I think it was Poppy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When I met you. Wow, I have to say I'm impressed. 6 kids. So how old were you when you had your first?
I was 25.
Okay. I mean, that's not so young. I mean, it's young, but it's not 20.
No. Yeah, like I've been to university. I had a career. I was a school teacher. Mm-hmm. I'd worked for a few years, and mm-hmm. I mean, I was married youngish, I suppose. I was 23.
Yeah.
Like these days, I think it's young. If I think of my daughter getting married this year, I'd freak out, It didn't feel so young back then. In fact, I think quite a few of my friends were married 21, 22, or at least engaged, so.
Yeah. And so did you know anything about chiropractic when you met your first husband?
No, I knew the word, and I knew that they looked after, people's spines. My father had always gone to a chiropractor because he had a bad back and had a motorcycle accident, sort of when he was 18 or 20 or something. And so he'd always gone to a chiropractor. So I knew about chiropractors, but I'd never been to a chiropractor.
Okay. And because, I don't know how it was like in Australia back then. because I went to chiropractic school. I graduated in 97. And back then, chiropractic was quite, it was like everybody knew what a chiropractor was. And I mean, I guess it was like that in Australia too. But I think that at least in the UK, I'm learning that it wasn't that well known back in the 90s. I mean, it was just starting, I think.
Yeah, I think probably where we lived too, there would have only been like maybe a chiropractor in the town, It was probably a little bit more to do with that. Because once I found out about chiropractic, I realized how many people went to a chiropractor. It's funny that, isn't it? Sometimes you just don't know about it. But I think also it was maybe the chiropractor that my dad went to was more pain focused. Mm-hmm. So there would be no reason for my dad to even think about bringing us in to get checked because mm-hmm. there was nothing wrong with us,
Yeah, of course. I mean, he probably never adjusted a child.
Yeah, possibly, or maybe just a symptomatic child,
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, I tell all my practice members, if they have children, bring in your children. Let me check them, always.
Yeah.
So, wow, that's really cool that you met him and then just jumped on the whole philosophy and was it easy for you to understand and accept and then live that lifestyle?
Not really. I mean, I think I had an innate pull to I don't want to use the word natural health care, but I think that's the easiest way for me to describe it. I remember when I was a teenager, I had a part-time job in a supermarket, and in the supermarket complex there was like a health food store, and I would always go into that health food store. I was drawn to it, so I was sort of drawn. I was, I played a lot of sport as a child, so my mum's a nurse, so, it wasn't like we didn't go to the doctor or to hospitals or anything like that, but she was also fairly into us being hardy, if you know what I mean. So we ate, a basic, simple diet. We didn't have a lot of rubbish in the house. Mm-hmm. We played plenty of sport, and we would have to literally be, on our deathbed for us to go to the doctors. Do you know what I mean? So we weren't sort of really, we weren't brought up in either extreme, somewhere in the middle. But I was always drawn to, I wonder what this, royal jelly is, or the ginseng thing. I was kind of fascinated by it. So I guess when I actually met my first husband, he was with a group of chiropractors, and they were in a backpackers, and they were adjusting each other. Mm-hmm. And I was intrigued by what they were doing, so I went over and asked them. And so I guess I was intrigued and interested in what he was doing, and so I willingly got adjusted, but it was through going to chiropractic seminars that I actually understood the philosophy.
Right.
Yeah, and so I didn't necessarily get the philosophy from my husband, even though I was on board. I didn't really understand it for myself. It was actually through hearing other chiropractic speakers who spoke very pure chiropractic and, talked about innate intelligence and, all those sorts of things that when I really took it on for myself. Yeah.
Yeah. This is really interesting because I'm hoping I think that a lot of people, at least in this country, know you in the industry, in our profession. And so I'm hoping that the people who are listening are people who know you and who are either chiropractors or students, because you're so involved in the profession. And I'm gonna be guessing that there's gonna be a lot of mothers also listening, and chiropractic mothers. And it's just a really interesting journey that you've had, I think, because you've had 6 children, and there's some of them are still little, and you've gone full circle. So you've got so much. I'm sure you have so much to say, like things that you've learned coming from not being a chiropractor and coming into the profession. sort of from the side, and now you're fully, I mean, right now you are so involved with it. I think it's just so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And did it when you when you were married, and did you know right away that you guys wanted children?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one of the reasons I married my first husband was because he's probably the only man I ever met that wanted to have a large family. So
Yeah,
we
that's cool.
it was definitely a commonality between us, that we wanted to have, a large family. So that was always on my radar. I my grandfather is one of 11, and
Wow.
so even though I'm one of three. I was always attracted to people with big families. We had a neighbor up the road, and they had 5 kids, and I loved hanging out at their house. So, I've always been attracted to that. I still am. I love being around big families. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It must be really. Do you ever have your six with you? I mean, it probably doesn't happen as often since your daughter's in Melbourne, or she's in
Yeah.
Australia.
Yeah, not as often as I'd like it to.
Yeah,
Maybe like once a year these days. But
yeah.
we'll have, like, at the moment, there's the 3 little ones, and my 17-year-old lives here. But there are periods where he goes back to England with his dad for weeks on end, and then it's just the 3 little ones, and it's definitely a totally different dynamic. When you go from having, or you would know this, when you extract one child, it feels like half of them have gone.
Yeah.
The whole dynamic changes.
Yeah.
And even like my husband's been away for 5 days. He ran a marathon on the weekend, so he's been in Rome, and just not having him in the house is like, life's so easy with less energy in the house.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. It totally shifts, and you feel a huge change when one of them is not there.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I love having them all around. It has its challenges, but I miss them when they're gone. But I also think being a mom and a parent is about doing the best you can to feed and water them and pass on your wisdom, and then let them go. Really feel strongly about that.
Yeah, definitely. And did chiropractic help you with your pregnancy? Did you get adjusted during your pregnancy?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I never really had any problems in my pregnancy per se. Anyway, whether that's because I got adjusted, before, during, after. I've been checked and adjusted pretty much every week for 20. How old am I? 21 when I started getting adjusted. I'm 48, so yeah, 27 years. So I don't know any different. Having said that, when I had my 4th pregnancy, I had some symphysis pubis issues, which I hadn't had any of my other pregnancies. And definitely, chiropractic sorted that out. When I see how that ends up for some women, I went and had a specific technique done, and that totally sorted that out. But yeah, aside from that, I had really great pregnancies. No morning sickness, no.
Yeah, that's great.
Pregnancies, yeah.
Did you enjoy being pregnant?
Loved it.
Did you?
I loved it. I would have kept going if I wasn't 43 on my last one.
I always tell people, because I just have an opinion or a theory that when a woman says, "Oh, I loved my pregnancy. It was so great. I felt so good," et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I'm not denying that that isn't possible, but I think that I feel that it's like, because I did enjoy being pregnant, but there is this level of discomfort that just in general, I think being big, towards the end of the pregnancy. And for the most part, the women that I meet, and it's actually unfortunate for most women to say this, that they just are completely miserable. Like they're either in the range between being in excruciating pain to a mild discomfort. Do you know what I mean? But it's rare that a woman will say, I loved being pregnant.
Yeah.
So when I hear, so you're saying that, and I think that's great. And it's probably why you had 6 children too, because I feel like after my third, I mean, I was 38, so I had my third just before I turned 39, and I just thought while I was pregnant with my third, that's it, I'm done. And
Yeah.
I find it really fascinating for women who have 4, 5, 6 children. I think that's I just, it's kind of like super mom level for me.
I think, for me, it's not that I wasn't tired, or sometimes I was like, oh my God, this is horrible. But, I loved the way I looked. I loved the shape of my body. I definitely felt connected to my children. I loved feeling the move inside me. Yeah, I have a girlfriend who, she has 2 boys, but she hated the baby moving inside her. It actually sort of made her feel physically sick.
Really?
So, it's interesting the way it makes us feel, I
Yeah.
think. Whereas for me, I felt whole and alive, in a way that I've never felt, and at any other time apart from when I'm. So maybe it's a hormonal thing for me too. Maybe those pregnancy hormones for me were just a great combination for me to feel that sense of wholeness and positivity, and
Yeah. Yeah.
wasn't not that I'm really a moody person, but there are certain times where you have hormonal shifts as a woman, and you can be a little grouchy, but I never was like that when I was pregnant. I just felt good all the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I can totally relate. I mean, I know what you mean, definitely, because I do remember feeling blissful, especially in my first pregnancy, and all 3 of them. And I feel that, yeah, if I could bottle that feeling you only feel when you're pregnant, I know exactly what you're talking about. But unfortunately, yeah, I think a lot of women just don't feel connected. They're just not as connected to their bodies, and the
yeah,
experience of being pregnant overall is not enjoyable. And I definitely believe that chiropractic has largely something to do with it.
I think so too, and I think it's not just the adjustments, the mindset around it too,
Yeah.
because I think it's not a disease, it's not an illness, and whereas when you operate sort of in a more medical paradigm of pregnancy being, it's very fear based, and so if you get pregnant and you're in a state of fear about your baby dying, something being wrong with it, something being wrong with you, you feel sick, you're concerned about the labor, how your life's going to change, all if you spend your whole time consumed by that, I can see it being, not a great
Yeah,
experience.
for sure, for sure. And that's how it is for most, I think for most, well, if you go through the system, and because unfortunately at least in Western culture, it's so medicalized, and it is a condition, or it's made to be a condition, and there's so many risks and precautions, and
Yeah.
so of course that is right from the beginning, they insert fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can't eat this, you can't do that, you better not go swimming, you better not do this. But it's like, I did not follow any of those rules. I just lived my life completely normally.
Yeah.
And, I didn't, yeah. I mean, with my last 3, I actually didn't even see a midwife until the week before I was ready to give birth.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I just, I'd done it before. I knew when, if you really tune into your body, when you're well and when you're not well. And, I just, I didn't want to be poked and prodded and weeing on a stick all the time, and making appointments and trying to fit. I have a busy life, and trying to fit that in my life was stressful. And so for me, it was just a stress I didn't want. And I just bought myself some little pH sticks, online, and I just checked my urine myself. And I never had any of those blood tests with my others anyway. I declined them, and I didn't have scans or anything. So there was just no need for me to go and sit opposite a midwife every week and say, I'm fine. Everything's good.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, you know your body. And your first 3 births were relatively normal.
Yeah, they all were. I mean, they were all very different, but I had my first 2 in Australia in a birthing centre, midwife-led birthing centre. So I didn't see a doctor the whole time I was pregnant with my first 2 anyway. I only ever saw midwives, and I saw a team of midwives. So on your team there would be, I can't remember the exact number, but I'm going to guess around 6 to 8 midwives. And so when you would go for your appointments there at the birthing centre along your pregnancy journey, they would try and get you to see every single one of the people on your team. So when it came for you actually going into labour, you would at least have met your midwife once. And so that's, how I had Bonnie and Isaac. And you would go into the birth centre when you were pretty much ready to give birth, have the baby there, and then you leave within 24 hours. And it's just like it's like a bedroom, really.
Yeah.
It was a big double bed, an open shower. There was a bath if you wanted to use that to birth in. I never didn't birth any of mine in water. It just was not for me. So I had those 2 there, had great experiences, a long labour with my first, which is normal. I wish more people would tell them that's normal,
Right. How long was it?
So my waters broke on at 1 o'clock in the morning. And then she was born at 5:30 the following day in the evening. So
that's not. You mean so? More.
It was like 17 hours or something.
That's nothing.
It's normal.
And that's normal.
Right?
That's totally normal. Yeah.
But I would say only 4 of those were spine tingling pain. The rest of it's manageable. You just get tired, and I think the important thing in your first baby more than anything is that you rest and sleep. And I was lucky that I had great guidance, and so I was able to, because I'd been awake for 17 hours, pretty much. There was a lot of resting with that. I wasn't like running up and down the corridor trying to get things going. I wasn't doing lotions and potions, and do you know what I mean? It was just very much relax and your baby will come when it's ready sort of thing. It was very much their attitude. And then with Isaac, I was actually very late with him, like 11 days, I think. So I was getting into the stage of, they had guidelines, that they had to adhere to in the birthing centre. And so I was coming up to the end of that, and I was getting a little bit stressed about that. But actually, they were really good about it, encouraged me to have a good cry and, what are you hanging on to? They had just had a really good philosophy. And so when I eventually went into labour with him, it was late at night, like 11:30 at night, and he was born at 4 a.m. So I had quite a fast labour with him.
And that's your second. That was your second.
That was my second, yeah. And he was actually born in his sac, so he exploded. The waters exploded as he came out. Going from having waters breaking then to nothing, for the second, they're just totally different, And he was a face presentation as well, so he was very bruised on his face when he came out. And then my second one was 17 days late, and he was born at home in England. I was living in England by that point.
Your second or third?
My third one, sorry, yeah. So
at home in England.
I had him in England. I had a home birth with him, and he was very late, but I only had 2.5 hour labour with him. He was super fast.
Oh my gosh, I can't.
I think I might have only pushed twice or something.
Wow.
He was like super fast.
And that was it like intense and fast?
Yeah, more painful. I would say his labour was probably one of my most painful labours out of all of them. So when people go, oh, it was really quick, that must have been easy, I'm like, I'd take a 4 or 5 hour any day over a 2 hour, So so yeah, so then I had a gap. So there's 8 years between Alex and Noah.
Uh-huh.
And Noah, when I had him, my waters actually broke on Saturday night, and like really broke. It wasn't like a little pop. It was, bucket loads of water. You see those scenes on the
On
on the
movies,
movies.
yeah.
Yeah, it was
It
one
was
of
like
those.
that.
Yeah. And I was in the car driving home from a seminar, chiropractic seminar. It was my last day of work. I thought, oh, I've got 2 weeks off now before the baby's coming,
Yeah,
and
right.
then my waters broke on the way home. But I actually didn't go into labour until the Tuesday afternoon, at about 2:30 in the afternoon, and he was born at 9 o'clock at night.
So
So I had
how
about a 7 hour,
Oh, so how long,
7 hour.
sorry, I keep interrupting you. This is so, I love this part. Um, so how long was it between when your waters broke and then your labor started?
Almost 3 days.
What, di- that's like, that would be unheard of in a, medicalized birth.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would have been induced and probably ended up with some kind of forceps
Or,
or
C-section. Yeah, for sure.
C-section. Yeah. So I had a independent midwife. With when I had my last three, I decided not to go in the medical system at all, and I went. I just employed an independent midwife, and so she came and I met with her probably about halfway through my pregnancy, just to make sure we were on the same page about what I wanted, and then the last couple of weeks. Before I was due, she would just come and we would really just talk, and she would check my urine, listen for the baby, but she would never use a Doppler. She just used like a little trumpet, and so we were very much on the same page. She was a very quiet personality too. I know my husband was surprised when I picked her because I'm not quiet, but I like to be quiet in labour, and I like my room to be quiet. I don't want somebody, telling me what to do. I just know that I need strength from another female, and so I knew that she could give me that if I was in a moment of uncertainty or wobbling or any of those sorts of things, that I could just look at her and know that everything was okay. So she was there for him, and I can't remember what I was telling you about her. Isn't that terrible? I'm blank.
You guys were sitting down and she was quiet, and like it was a couple weeks before your due date, and
Oh, yeah, that's right. So when my waters broke, so it was on late Saturday night. I messaged her just to say, look, my waters are broken. We're on the way back. I was actually in Taunton, so it was like an hour's drive from where we lived. And so I just said, look, we'll get home and we'll settle in, and I'll let you know if anything happens. So I was in communication with her, and then of course, nothing did happen, and we just went to sleep, and woke up the next day, and she came round, and we spoke about my options, and we spoke about the risk of infection, and so she just encouraged me to take my temperature regularly throughout the day, to rest, not to have a bath or any of those sorts of things, just to keep myself clean, and and then just to rest basically, and eat some, good things for labour. One of my things is chicken soup. I love to have chicken to build up your reserves, and just stay calm and stay home. So that's basically what I did. And I just rested as much as I could. And then by the time I got to Tuesday morning, I was a little like, oh, when is this going to happen?
I'm sure.
And I wasn't ever worried per se, but, she's also got protocol that she has to stick to. And I think in the independent midwife world, it's around 72 hours where they start to think, well, we probably need to have a little look at, what's happening here. So she just sort of sat me down. I'll never forget it. I was on my own in the living room and with her, and my husband was at work. The older kids were at school, and she just said to me, what are you worried about? And, what are you fearful about with having this baby? And I just started crying, and all this stuff came out about, all my fears of my older children not accepting my new
Oh,
baby,
wow.
my ex-husband not accepting him, and which was a crazy thought because, you know, my ex-husband absolutely adores children and, you know, has been wonderful to my, you know, children in my second marriage. And um but, you know, there was all these sorts of fears, and would my, you know, my children's now stepfather, how would he be with having his own child in the relationship, and would that cause friction? You know, there was all these things that I hadn't really, they weren't conscious thoughts, but they were obviously whirling around in there somewhere. And so she did some EFT with me where, you know, we did some tapping, and then she left and she told me that I needed to share it all with my husband and that I should encourage him to share his fears as well. And so we did that, and I'm not kidding, within 5 minutes of me sort of offloading all this stuff to my husband, my labor started.
Wow.
And I know it was crazy, and like started with a vengeance. It wasn't like cramping, it was like
Boom.
started.
Yeah.
It was back, you know, it was like every 2 minutes sort of thing straight away.
That's amazing.
And then so I called my my ex-husband's wife, because he's remarried. I called her, and she went and got all the older kids for me and brought them to the house so that they were home, because I wanted them there. Called my midwife. She came over, and yeah, he was born. He was born that night, and my kids were there to see it. In fact, my second son was actually like right at the catching end and was totally absorbed in the whole thing. And, you know, I'll never forget him saying to my husband, when his head was coming out, he turned to Rob and said, oh, like, this is just the opportunity of a lifetime, seeing your, you know, brother or sister being born, you know.
Wow.
And
I just got chills. That's so beautiful. That's just amazing. For a boy, how old was he?
So he would have been 10, I think. And then afterwards, like, he helped check the placenta. When the midwife was checking the placenta, he was just fascinated by the whole thing. You know, he was really, really into it.
It is fascinating, and it's so telling that your son, a 10-year-old boy, who, you know, a lot of boys would be like, I don't really think I want to see this, or, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's such a huge testament to how you communicated and taught him and educated him about what's going on in the body. And, you know, it's not like just any boy that can do that, really.
No, I guess, you know, yeah, I guess we just try to make it normal, you know, and there was no pressure on them to be there. In fact, Bonnie, who's the eldest, and Alex, number 3, they had fallen asleep at this point. You know, they were like, come on, when's this going to happen? You know, they were sort of over it after an hour, you know. And so there was, like, it wasn't like, quick, you've got to wake them up and see this, you know. It was, you either will be there or you won't be there, depending on, you know, what's meant to be. And so it was literally just Isaac and myself and Noah. And what's interesting too is that Isaac and Noah are actually quite similar in personality. And when I had Isaac, it was, you know, 4:00 in the morning. It was very, very quiet. The midwife that was on duty at the birth center at that time was a midwife I'd never met before. She was also a very quiet personality. And, you know, pretty soon after he was born, my husband fell asleep. And so it was just him and I in that room in the birth center for hours before I could ring anybody to tell that he'd been born, you know, because it was the middle of the night. And so I had a similar experience here with having him there, and it just being Noah being born, and my midwife was very quiet and placid. It was late at night. So it was a very similar sort of energy. It was really interesting.
Yeah, that's nice.
When I think about that. And my eldest daughter and my number 5, Poppy, were both born into a party, you know, like hundreds of people in the room, and they're both like that. You know, their personalities are so similar, it's not funny.
Yeah, that's really cool. You know, I wanted to go back and ask about the whole thing about your waters breaking and then not going into labor until 3 days later. there's such a fear. I mean, what is it about the infection? Because I mean, of course, we understand, when it's encapsulated, it's a sterile environment, et cetera, et cetera. But there is such a huge. It's on alert. We're talking not just, oh yeah, it's like a slight risk. I mean, we're talking high alert here. I've heard
Yeah.
from women, and yet it was just you just had this. It seems like you went to sleep, and obviously you slept a couple nights. I'm sure you were just waiting and waiting, of course, but that sense of fear and urgency was just. It sounds like it was not even there.
No, and I mean, maybe if it had been my first baby, maybe I would have been more worried. I don't know, but because because I'd done it before, I knew what to expect. I knew what labor was and what labor wasn't. And I think when you have your first baby, the minute your waters break, you think it's red light flashing and everything's going to happen in 45 minutes, don't you? You don't really know what labor pains are. Whereas. So I because I think it was baby number 4, I was definitely more relaxed because of that. And I've also done a lot of reading about the risks and things, and so I don't know, just didn't go to that place of fear, I suppose. And I knew that it was probably just the forewaters, do you know what I mean? So that the baby was, still safe in its sac. I don't know the exact science on it, but my midwife was saying to me that those waters will regenerate, because they're the front waters. So yeah, I didn't feel panicked at all. I think once you go into that panic place, it's all over Red Rover. When women are in that place, is much, much, much more difficult to birth. I think you shut down. I think your contractions shut down, and so I was very aware of not to put myself in that headspace.
Yeah, and then it's that story about you. I think that it was a really brilliant way that the midwife just calmly asked you, so what are you afraid of? What are you thinking about? And I think that just for you to have that space to open up to her, and then to be able to share that and open up to your husband, and then you said your labor started 5 minutes later. I wish that more women could have that guidance right then and there, because how often do we hear about, oh, my labor didn't progress, and then boom, they have an unplanned C-section.
Yeah. Well, because in our society, we don't place any value on an emotional and mental health. We don't place any value at all on the fact that your emotional state can affect your physical state. And that's just crazy. I think in years to come, we'll look back on that as being a crazy thought. I think, even my husband, who 10 years ago, if I'd said, oh, well, all we need to do is some EFT and talk about our emotions and the labor will get going, he would have been like, are you crazy? Because it does sound crazy. Yeah. But having had the experience and seeing it, we were like, whoa, man, this is crazy, But yeah, I definitely think that, I mean, this is a bit of a far out statement, but I can pretty much tell you when I meet a pregnant woman, whether they're going to end up having a, safe and natural delivery, either at home or hospital, whatever they choose, or whether they're going to end up having intervention. I can tell by the language they use, because behind the language is their own fear. And when they start using disclaimers about, well, I have to do what the hospital says, I have to do what the doctor said. Like they're relinquishing ownership of their bodies, and control. And I think when you use language like that and your emotions are really fear-based, then, you just have no hope.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear that all the time too. I think you're right. I think that once because you're so experienced, twice as much as me. I have three kids. Um, uh, Even so, when I meet pregnant women, I know pretty early on, almost immediately, that this is going to be a hard labor.
Yeah.
If they don't understand, and I think a lot of it is it's fear, but I think a lot of it is just in ignorance. It's just they don't know that they don't know. They are within they're following what they're being told, and because of the fear, I think they feel like there's no other choice. There's
Yeah.
no other option.
Sure. Yeah. Because if you make a choice and you get it wrong, then it's your fault,
Yeah.
and there's a fear around that. I also think there's something in too much information and too much planning. Like, if I could, I haven't told you about birth number 5 and 6, but all 6 of my births have been completely different. And I have never had a birth plan from any of them. I had certain things that I did and did not want to occur if there was a choice of a C-section or a this or a this or a that. I had definitely had written down what my choices would be, and Rob and I had agreed on those. And in my first version, Wayne and I had agreed on those, whether we were going to have Syntocin, whether we were having vitamin K. We certainly made decisions about those things. But in terms of put the music on, get the candles out, then we're going to do this, and then I'm having some massage, and then we're going to use the TENS machine. Like, I just think that that's almost a recipe for disaster, because you just don't know. Like, it's not I think the mistake we make is it's not our births, it's our children's births.
Yeah.
So we don't even know who they are yet. We don't know what their personality is. We don't know anything about them. And it's their journey, and we're just the vehicle for that.
Yeah.
So being able to connect with them and let them have their journey is kind of really where I think it's at, and when we try and make it about us, the birth about, it all looking pretty and it being recorded and, having this person there and that person there and like trying to control it, I think that I don't think we should do that. I'm also not a massive fan of relying on your husband as being your support person.
I'm laughing because, I agree.
Men are protectors, and they are there. They should be. I'm not saying they shouldn't be there, but this whole culture of the husband's got to be your support they're just not capable in a lot of respects. Like, I remember when my first was being born, and I had a long pushing phase with her, nearly 2 hours, and I remember looking into my husband's eyes and saying, are you okay? Because he was just concerned for me. He doesn't have a relationship and connection with the child yet. I do, but he doesn't. Mm-hmm. His concern is for me, the amount of pain I'm in and how awful this is looking, and so I couldn't rely on him for support, really. I mean, I was very grateful that he was there, but the support I got in that labor was from my midwife,
Yeah.
And my mum was there. My mum was only there for my first child, and that was a wonderful healing experience for us. But, from that point on, I chose women to be at my birth. Aside from my midwife, I often had a girlfriend or a chiropractor or somebody that I just knew I could get strength from, and that they would bring a feminine energy into the room, because you don't need a bloke who's going to pass out at the sight of blood, or someone whose main concern is for you, and is afraid of something happening to you.
Yeah. That's so true. It's you said so many things in there. I find it so enlightening and insightful that you said that it's not our birth, it's our child's birth. And if the birthing, just the birthing culture would shift in that mindset, that's such a huge piece. It's there, and for you have the experience to have who's had 6 births, and you can say that each of them were different, because each of those children are very different from each other. and they're individuals, and each birth is their own individual experience. It's sure it's you're the same body, but it's their birth. And I think that that's so enlightening. I love that. I think that's, I've never heard someone acknowledge it that way, because, or even my midwives never said it that way. There's so much to learn with that. I love it.
Well, if you think about your own birth, if you sit down after we've spoken and think about how your children's personalities you can see that in their births, and I guarantee you'll make some connections.
Oh, absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
You know, like I said, with my second son, who was born in the middle of the night, we were pretty much by ourselves, just him and I. I have a very strong innate connection with him. Like I know when he's upset. I know if he's going to call me. I can feel it. Even now, even though we live in different countries, I feel it in him. And he likes to be on his own. He loves his family, but if we would move to a new house, he would pick the bedroom the furthest away from everybody, because he likes that quietness and that alone time, and it's very much like his birth, and whereas my eldest and my number 5, the ones who I said about the party, they're just party animals. And
yeah, she was when I met you at that seminar in January, I mean, she was amazing. Just the independence and the mingling and the socializing, and
yeah, that's her. She her labor was only about 50 minutes. Actually, she was a super fast labor. And I don't think I even pushed her out. She was coming out no matter what I did, and she just screamed from the minute she came out, and didn't stop for about 4 years. She's just absolutely full of beans and energy. And all the kids were in the room. My midwife had just arrived. My girlfriend Claire, who is a chiropractor, who you probably know, Claire Ryan, she had just arrived, and it was just all this hype of activity. And then within an hour of her being born, my other girlfriend came over to see. Like, it was just a big party, and we were popping champagne, and that's just what she's like.
Yeah. And she's 8, you said?
She's 7 now.
Okay, yeah. And then what was your last labor like?
So I think I was like, maybe my due date was, say, like I'm just trying to remember, like the 6th or something. She was actually born on the 11th. So she was like a few days over my date, I thought. And I had a show, which I hadn't had with any of mine before. So I never knew what the show, when people say, oh, you've had a show, I never knew what that was. So I've had that experience as well. So, I had that sort of thick, mucusy kind of show, and a little bit of blood very early on Tuesday morning. But I was actually in town shopping, and I had a few things I needed to do. So I just carried on doing them. But I texted my husband to say, look, I've had a show, so we're probably going to have some action today. And then I went home, but nothing really sort of happened. And then it was about 9:30, 10 o'clock that night that I started having a few mild contractions. And I thought, oh yeah, it's going to happen tonight. So same thing. I called my older kids. They were, one of them was staying at a friend's house, and one was at his dad's, maybe, I don't know. And just because I like them being in the house. They don't have to watch, but I like to know they're all with me, So I just called them all and said, I think I'm going to have the baby tonight, so I'd love it if you were home. So they all came home, and then we all slept in my bedroom, because I birth in my bedroom. I birth on the floor. And so I set up my little birthing area, and I went to sleep on the floor. And then my older kids were asleep in my bed, and then my husband was asleep on the floor with me, and the other 2 little kids were in their own beds. And then we slept there all night. And then I woke up about 3:30 in the morning, and just sort of thirsty, sat up to have a drink. And as I sat up, my waters went. So I messaged my midwife to say, look, my waters have gone. I'm having a few mild contractions. Just thought I'd let you know. And she was then born at 6. So it's probably like 2.5 hours, 3 hours. But the midwife stayed outside the room. I actually didn't even have them in the room, because my my midwife that I had for Poppy and Noah wasn't working at the time, and I really didn't want anybody else. There was nobody else that I'd interviewed in my area that I connected with. Like, even though there were independent midwives, they were still not really, didn't have as a deeper philosophy as I have. And so I wanted them there more from the point of view that if there was a problem that I had a backup, but I pretty much birthed Ava, on my own, really. Yeah. But I did have a similar experience on an emotional level where I felt like I needed to push, but I couldn't push. Like, it was, my body wanted to, but it just sort of didn't happen. You get that urge where you just can't control it, you just go, and I felt like I wanted to do that, but it wasn't coming. And that transitioning phase, just kept lingering and lingering. And I just said to my husband, I'm so mad at you. I didn't want to have this baby. And it's your fault. And then she just whooshed out,
Oh,
cool. But again, it was quiet. The kids were actually, even though the kids were in the room, they were all asleep. So they woke up just literally before she came out. So they were all there when she was born, and it was lovely. And she's quiet and placid and was a super easy baby. So it was nice. But she's also very much our I don't know what the right word is, but she's the peacemaker. So she likes everyone to be happy. She sticks up for everybody. If ever Poppy gets in trouble, then she sticks up for her. Yeah. And, like if I send her to a room, Ava will come and say, she didn't do anything wrong. She was only doing this and that. She's like, she's like connects us, I guess is the right word.
Yeah. She was so comfortable with everybody, like sitting on everybody's lap at the seminar, and just really chill, really content.
Yeah. She knows who she is.
Yeah. And so you have 4 girls and 2 boys.
No, three.
Sorry.
3 girls,
wow.
3 girls, 3 boys,
fun.
yeah. So a girl, then 3 boys, then the 2 girls.
Right. Cool.
Yeah.
Wow. And do you think it got easier with each child because the other siblings could help you?
Oh, that's a really tricky question. I think when whether you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 or 10, it depends really on where you're at in your life and what's going on externally, as well as the personality that arrives. Some babies are easier than others. Some toddlers are easier than others. Some 10-year-olds are easier than others, And I really think I don't think you can say whether having 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 is easier or not. Like I know when I had Noah, for instance, my daughter was 12 or 13, and everyone was saying to me, oh, she's going to be so helpful. You're so lucky you've got her. And actually my sons were more helpful than her. And, I mean, she's very helpful now, but it was that phase in her life where, when they go into teenagerhood, they kind of retreat into their bedrooms. I call it the caveman phase where, they hibernate for a certain period of time and they're figuring themselves out and they become a bit more self-centered and not necessarily want to be part of the family. They more want to be, it's all about their friends. Yeah. And so, the little ones were born when Bonnie went into that phase. So even though I had, technically a daughter that would supposedly on paper look like she was going to be more helpful, in some ways the boys were either just as helpful or more helpful in that phase. So, yeah, and I mean, Noah was a supersonic, easy baby, easy kid, so he just kind of slotted right in. It really was easy, but Poppy was a very difficult baby.
You said she was screaming for the first 4 years.
Oh, she just cried all the bloody time, and I'm the only person that could hold her. So, she wouldn't sleep in the pram. She would sleep in a sling. So, I've already got a toddler and 3 older children. I'm going to football practice and dancing practice and this and that, and this child that has to be held by me, and so I found her probably the most difficult out of all of them. Introducing her into the family was difficult, but I don't think that's because she was my fifth child. I think it's just if she'd been my second, it would have been difficult.
I see. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it was a busy phase. I had 3 kids in high school and, a 3-year-old and a baby, and it just pulled in 20 different directions. It was more about that as well as her being difficult, I think. Yeah. But, I mean, it gets easier from the point of view that it ends, so you don't stress about it, each phase comes and goes.
Yeah.
And I think that's what gets easier the more kids you have. That they're phases and they come and go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge because I think that mothers with one child, that's all that there is. It's just the one child. And especially when they're born, it's very, I mean, I remember, and you probably remember too, when you're with this 2-week-old, that's your whole world in that moment. And you think that it's going to be, that's how it's going to be. It feels like that's how it's going to be forever. And yet, and then fast forward when the baby's 1.5 years, and then you think back and you're just like, wow, how did I get here so fast? And I just, from experience, each phase goes by really, really fast, to the point where, you're probably, so your youngest is 5, you said?
Yeah, she'll be 5 next week.
So, So, it's my youngest is 5.5. And I look back and I'm thinking, what, she was just a little baby just not too long ago, and it just goes by so fast. And so, I think that's a huge part of what motherhood, we realize eventually that it's just, they're little snippets of time. They're just little phases that pass, and it's tough at some moments, like you have like a really crappy night or a succession of crappy nights, and then you're thinking, oh my God, this is never going to end. And actually it does. You just keep going, you just move on.
Yeah. And also I think there's this syndrome of perfect parenting where, when all the ducks are lined up and everything's going well, then, it's because we've done everything right. We've read the right books and we've disciplined them right, or we've fed them right, or we've got the sleeping routine right, or, whatever it is. But as soon as it's going bad, if you parent that way, you then have to think, well, God, if it's going bad, then these things must be my fault. What am I doing wrong? And I think, for me, you shouldn't take the glory, and you also shouldn't take the bad on. It just is, Some kids come out and sleep well, some kids don't, and I think if you can sort of just do what you can do on a day-to-day basis and get through the day, and then that's all you can do, feed them, water them, love them, and that's it. But I find that, there's this whole judgment thing about, Freddie could walk at 12 months and this one sleeps through the night at 6 weeks. Like, you want to kill the mother, don't you? When you're in the baby phase and the mother that says, oh, mine's sleeping through the night, you're like, ah! And I think, when you have a baby like that, and I have had 4 out of 6 babies that have done that, by the way, so I do know that it's possible, but I've also had 2 babies that did not sleep through the night until they were nearly 14 months old. So was it my routine that I established? I thought it was with babies number 1 and 2, because they did sleep through the night very quickly. So I swore it was because of my routine and how good I was at feeding and how good I was at this and that. And then when I got number 3, who did not sleep till he was 14 months old through the night, I did all the same things. Yeah. And he just didn't sleep through the night. And so I'm really glad I had that experience, because it gave me empathy for the women who have babies like that, whereas before I was probably a little bit judgmental, thinking, well, if you just got them in a better routine and you did this and you did that and you swaddle them and you lie them on the side, and yes, all of those things help, don't get me wrong, but some kids, no matter what you do, wake up and want to feed a lot,
Yeah. Did you co-sleep? Did you breastfeed through that first year?
So a combination of them. I always had them in the room with me for the first year. Some in the bed, some in a Moses basket beside me. It just sort of, I guess the more kids you have, if they're still coming in and out of the bed with you, like Ava still comes into my bed probably 4 out of 7 nights. At 2 or 3 in the morning, I hear the footsteps down the corridor and she jumps in with us, They eventually leave, so I don't worry about it. But I didn't want to have a little baby and a toddler in my bed at the same time. And my husband and I. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't sleep. I don't sleep very well with them in the bed, so for me it was better having them beside.
Yeah.
But if they, so I guess if they woke up for feeds, 10 o'clock at night or even, midnight or whatever, I would sit up, feed them, burp them, change them, and swaddle them and put them back into the crib beside me. But if it was like 5 in the morning, I would often just, stick them on my boob and go back to sleep, and then they would always then sleep till 7:30, So, because for me it was important. I need to sleep. I was not getting up at 5, and I knew if I got up at 5 and fed them, changed them, and everything, by the time I put them back down, it'd be 6, and what's the point in going back to bed? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas, so I kind of did a mixture of it, really. I didn't, no hard or fast rules.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that women and mothers experience after the birth is that's when it really starts. That's when the hard work starts. Was it like, did you feel like you learned a whole lot, especially from the first one, but did you learn a whole lot with each baby, immediately after the birth? Like new stuff,
Oh, yeah. I think so. And I was very, very fortunate that when I had my first child that my mother came and lived with me for a week and took care of me. So all I had to do was feed my baby, have a shower, and lie in bed. She cooked, she cleaned, she just totally took care of me. And I had company, because it can be lonely in that first week, and and because my mum had obviously had us, and she had 3 kids under 3, so she had to do a routine, to survive. And so she was very helpful in terms of helping me set out some kind of a structure and how to bath them and how to change nappies. I use cloth nappies, and so how to make a nappy, and then when on day 3 when my milk came in, I'm not a very big chested person anyway, and I went from like being an A cup to a D cup overnight, and I remember walking out going to my mum, oh my God, what is this, and her running around buying cabbage leaves and all sorts of things to try and calm them down. And but yeah, that's what I learned with baby number 1. I had not prepared myself for how painful and how difficult breastfeeding was going to be. I would just look at these women who breastfed and think, oh my God, that looks so beautiful. Yeah. And I did not feel beautiful when I was breastfeeding. I couldn't even put a bra on for about a week. And so, going out and getting these enormous things out that were just on fire and so swollen that there wasn't even a nipple I could put in the baby's mouth, So I learned a lot about, I was determined to breastfeed. I was bottle fed, so I know that had I said to my mum, do you think I should bottle feed? She might have said, well, if it's that difficult and it hurt for me, then maybe that's an option. Whereas I was determined not to, that just wasn't an option for me. So I then went and got some advice from actually a chiropractor that I had done some work with. His wife had huge difficulty breastfeeding, and so I rang her and said, what can I do? Does it get easier? And so I think what I learned in my first baby was if you want a desired outcome, then you need to go to the person who's achieved that. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like I knew that I couldn't really talk it through with my mum, even though she was helpful in so many, many, many ways, and I'm so grateful for having her there. But she couldn't really help me with breastfeeding because she didn't breastfeed us. So I think I learned that in baby number one, and then I've taken that forward whenever I had new challenges with subsequent children. I would look for advice on somebody that I admired, or they were doing what I wanted to do. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
absolutely. Yeah.
So that's where I went. That's where I went to for my help,
Yeah.
if you like.
Yeah.
I definitely avoided mothers groups. I know that doesn't go down very well with people, but I did not go to mothers groups. I found it a negative, soul destroying experience. I went a couple of times, but it was almost competition
Yeah.
amongst the mothers. It was also husband bashing, which I'm not into. Look, there are times when they drive you nuts, but at the end of the day, it's not productive just sitting around complaining about, oh, they don't understand. Well, of course they don't understand. They've never had a baby, They can't understand. They can't. It's not
It's not
possible for them to
possible. It's
understand.
not. I mean, that was a smart decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, I have learnt new things along the way, but in dealing with that, it was always to try and find a resource of, okay, the outcome I want is this, so I need to talk it through with somebody who's either had a similar experience and got there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, does that make sense?
So were you able to successfully breastfeed her?
Yeah. I breastfed all my kids. I breastfed her for the least amount of time, 11 months. She gave up by herself.
Mm-hmm.
And very interestingly, she just one day rejected the milk and just never asked for it again. And within a couple of days, my period returned.
Oh.
So I have read that the taste of the milk can change around the time of your cycle.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where I read that, but I have read that somewhere, and I often wonder whether the taste of it changed so much that she was like, oh, that's gross, or whether it was just her time to move on. She also walked the same week. So maybe it's like, I'm moving away from you now, So I pretty much let them give up on their own. They gave up she was 11 months, and the longest I fed for was 19 months.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
and mostly after once they started having food, between sort of 9 and 12 months was when they're properly eating, I suppose. I would only really do morning feeds and bedtime feeds anyway, not a lot during the day. And that was not, I didn't really have to force that. That was just sort of a natural thing. I went to a health visitor, I guess you could call hers, but she was a natural health visitor. This was in Melbourne in Australia, and she followed sort of like Steiner principles. And I went to her to ask about weaning, because I know in my mum's day, everyone just fed their babies baby rice from like 10 weeks old or something, and I was thinking, that just doesn't seem right. If the kid can't even sit up, why are you sitting it in a chair and feeding it with a spoon? It just didn't seem right to me. But then there were some other cultures who, they would give their kids food, not necessarily baby rice, but they would just let them eat off their plate or, whatever was going on. So I was a little bit confused by that. So I went to see her, and she sort of explained that in the Steiner philosophy that once a baby sort of begins to crawl, they're moving away from you. And so part of that moving away from you is moving towards food. And, their ability, their desire to want to feed themselves and nourish themselves. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes what we can do, we can sort of like almost force the breast on them. Mm-hmm. So that she said, to once they start crawling, wait till they come to you for it rather than you sitting them down going, right, now it's time to feed you.
Yeah.
And then start introducing food and just like put it out and let them have what they want. And so I sort of followed that philosophy really. Yeah. And that definitely worked for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at that point, I think that they can even grasp your shirt and pull it up on their own. I think that I think that they just make the decision. But that makes sense. It makes sense that they're moving away from you. And if you think about tens of thousands of years ago and where they're crawling and they're doing their own foraging, and then they find whatever on the ground, and they put it in their mouths. That's a form of discovery and exploration for food, to feed themselves. But that's actually really, really, that was good advice. It makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. She was a really interesting lady, actually.
So you're in Barcelona, or?
No, I live in Palma, in Mallorca.
Okay. Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. No wonder why you moved there. It sounds so beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful island. And, we were really ready to create a change. I mean, I think my older children were, sort of flying the nest, if you like. And one of the reasons I had stayed in Plymouth was so that my first husband and I could raise the children together. And so, we lived a couple of streets away from each other, and the kids went between our houses, and they could go. We had a routine of so that we knew where they were supposed to be at each time, but they sort of freely went between us, particularly the older they got. Sometimes they might stay more with their dad or more with me or whatever. We never sort of really tried to control that. And so when it came to the point, well, I don't really need to be here anymore. And, what do we want to do? Do I want to go back to Australia? There was just all sorts of things going on. And one of the things for me was missing sunshine and an outdoor lifestyle. And so for us, coming over here to Spain was a sidestep to that. So I'm still close to my kids, geographically, because Australia's a long, 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 long way away. And even though my daughter has since gone over to Australia, but that's a whole other story. Mm-hmm. But I felt like I could still have access to my life in England. I can still do the work I love to do in England, but we get the opportunity to have an outdoor lifestyle and some sunshine. So, but interestingly, I really, really miss England.
Oh, do you?
Yes, I do. I miss. I think what I've learned from this experience is that higher up on my list of values is people and my connections with people. And I have built up such a strong network of people in the UK that I hadn't realised I had until I left. And I really, really, really miss it. And I'm not talking about people necessarily around where I lived, even though I had a very small, tight group of friends where I lived in Plymouth. And my closest friend from that group actually died last year. And it really was, affected me deeply in a way that I had never imagined it would. I've had people die in my life before, like family, but never a friend. And what it made me realize is, friends, and particularly deep friendships that you have, you choose that. Your family's just your family. Not that that's a negative thing, but you're born into that, and that's just who it is. You don't get to choose that. But when you choose somebody to be that close with in your life, and you lose that, it affected me in a way that I hadn't imagined. And so I miss that. I miss those day-to-day conversations with people I've known for 20 years. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Just the chin wagging stuff, when you think the same way and you're on the same wavelength, all that kind of stuff,
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you're outgoing and you're sociable, and you were there. You said you were there for 20 years.
Yeah, nearly to 19 years.
Yeah, and so that's a huge shift. I mean, just geographically and the terrain, from beach and sun, or you were on the coast,
rain.
But but rain to lots of sun all the time, practically, right?
Yeah. It was so funny because it doesn't rain very much here. I think they have 320 days out of 350 that are sunshine. It's crazy, and anyway, so in November last year, it rained for 3 days straight, and I'm complaining to my husband. I'm like, this is the third day of rain. Like, what's going on? We were laughing about it because, normally it would be 28 days of rain, but I was like, really, this is not on 3 days of rain.
Yeah. That's just normal here in the UK. That's really funny. You got spoiled pretty fast.
Yeah, pretty fast. It's amazing, actually, how quickly you acclimatise. I've forgotten, because I remember my first year in England thinking I was never, ever going to be able to have a day without thermals ever again in my life, because I think I wore tights underneath my jeans for about a year when I first moved to England. I was so cold, and I used to see these people going out on Saturday night with just their dress and their handbag, and I'm like, I have thermals and woolly boots and hats and gloves, and I'm thinking, oh my God, you people are crazy, But sure enough, you do acclimatise.
Yeah, you do. Well, it sounds like it's so lovely there. I've never been there before.
It's beautiful. You should bring your family here for a holiday.
Oh, yeah.
It's a beautiful.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful.
And your kids are they? You said they were in international school, right?
No, so my eldest is in an international school because he's doing his A levels, and he doesn't speak Spanish. So even though he has actually done a Spanish GCSE while he's here, so he'll be taking that as instead of doing an A level, he's done a Spanish GCSE because he's not high enough level to do the A level. So he's at an international school. It's a very small school. It only has years 12 and 13 in it, so it's just A levels. And they know their teachers by their first name, 6 or 7 kids in a class. It's just been a great academic experience for him, actually. And they're very into getting the best out of you rather than pigeonholing them in somewhere. It's been really good for him, actually. And but the kids went straight into a local Spanish school, which actually speaks Spanish and Mallorquin, which is the local dialect here. And so it's a traditional school. It's a Catholic school, so there's that element in there as well. And but we chose it because of its proximity to our house, as well as the fact that it's tiny. So there's only one class per year, and there's only about 13, 14 children in every class. And we just felt that with the children making the move from the UK to here, we wanted them to go somewhere where they felt special and were taken care of. And I only think that happens in a small place. So that's why we chose it. It's got some things I don't really like too much, but for the most part, it's been a really positive experience. And it'll be 2 years in July, and they are completely bilingual.
Wow.
And the Noah in particular, who's the 10-year-old, he's doing all of his written work in Spanish.
Oh my goodness!
So
that's so cool.
It has been difficult for him. The first year, he was very teary and frustrated and upset. And it's actually only this year, like probably since January, where he said to me, I can see now the advantages I'm going to have in life from knowing this. He said last year was so difficult because he was just thrown into, year 4 at school, having to read and write in Spanish.
Yeah.
And he didn't know anything, and he can see now how like the rewiring of his brain will be just so beneficial for him later on. And we just kept trying to tell him that, like, I know you don't understand it now, but you'll be so grateful for this in years to come, And he can see that now. So that's great. And he's going to continue to see that because he's going to look back when he's like 18, 19 or 20 when wherever he chooses to go. Because do you think he's going to be a chiropractor too? Well, that's if he doesn't make it as an international footballer.
Okay,
so
cool. Yay.
We'll see.
I see. He's gonna. Wow, it's such a huge tool to have when you relocate in a different country, new language. That is just really impressive. I love that. I think all children, if they can experience that, it is really useful in life.
Yeah. I mean, even to the point, if we were to come back to England, we would try and move somewhere where we could send them to a bilingual school because we can just, it's been very difficult for me to learn the language because I'm not working here. I'm still doing all the work I did in the UK. I just work remotely and, go back and forth, as you've seen. And so I'm not really speaking Spanish to anybody. And because we live in the city, you can get by with English, So I've become one of those lazy immigrants, who can say sangria and hola and San Miguel and paella, and that's about it,
and
so
hola and cómo está.
yeah, exactly. I can order some food and get my groceries and pick the kids up from school. I know some basics, but because my husband's working here, he obviously speaks Spanish all day, so I don't say it's been easier for him. He still had to study, and he's actually now taking some advanced classes. He just started last week because he wants to increase his vocabulary. But because he can survive in the practice and he can survive in the shops and things like that. But if we had to take the car to the mechanic, he doesn't have the vocabulary for that. So he's now taking some advanced classes. But yeah, he's loved it, and he's overjoyed with himself that he can speak another language. He's always wanted to be able to speak another language.
That's great. So. That's great. This has been so... I've loved hearing your story and meeting you, at this level.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I've enjoyed it.
And I just... I feel like there's so much more that I wanted to ask you, but I think that it's going to be so informative for women because of just doing and choosing what you want and what you feel as a mother from the very first baby to through your sixth one, and you're continually doing that. It's you make it sound quite easy.
Well, it's not easy, and I think there are days where I'm frustrated and I just want to curl under my pillow and wish there was nobody else here but me. I definitely have days like that, and we all have that, and that's normal. And I think it's important to remember that it's normal, and there's no such thing as doing it right or wrong. You just do the best you can every day. And sometimes your best isn't good enough, and sometimes it is. That's just the way it is. That's just life.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Melissa, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I've been listening so intently and learning a lot, actually. Learning, but it's not like learning. It's more like I just feel that what you've shared has it's reminded me of the beauty of like discovering yourself as a mother and also just I feel like because you've had more experience than me with children, because we're the same age, yet your journey is just so different, and yet there's like such a core similarity too. Do you know what I mean? As mothers, and I think that's just really, I love connecting with that, and I'm really thankful that you were on here sharing all that.
Oh, my pleasure. And you know what? It's not easy to find those connections too. Would you say?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, for sure. That's the other thing. Like as you were talking and sharing everything, I just thought, I wish I met you earlier because we have such similar philosophies. Living a chiropractic lifestyle and being mothers and choosing a much more, I also don't like the word natural as well because it's just so, it's like redundant. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, okay, it's just the way it is for me. Like, just makes sense. That's just how it always has been for me. It's just this automatic, organic thing. And to connect at that level with another mother, another woman is, for me, I don't find that very often. So, I mean, within the profession, yeah, but just outside the profession, yeah. So, well.
Yeah, I agree. Because you know what, I also don't fit into that whole natural health world, to me, that's just, it's still an outside-in perspective, like homeopathics, vitamins, whether you're doing anything natural, if you're still coming at it from an outside in perspective, it doesn't make sense to me either. Do you know what I'm saying?
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. I get it. I get what you're saying, but I think it's
a whole other podcast.
Totally. It totally is. All right. Well, I'm about to adjust a few people, and I really appreciate you being on this episode. It's been really enlightening, and I've loved it.
Cool. Take care. Bye.
Wasn't that conversation full of great stuff? I loved everything that Melissa shared. If you'd like to reach out to her and ask her any question about what she said, feel free to email her at melissasandford@gmail.com. I'll have her info on the show notes, so be sure to check that out. You can also find out about this episode on my website, yourdoinggreatmom.com. Tune in to next week for another amazing conversation on the You're Doing Great Mom podcast. I'm Marianne Shiozawa, and I'll see you next week.